So you guys don't want to miss this one. We're going to be breaking down Bitcoin, Ethereum, take a look at Solana, and then also take a look at some securities that are maybe moving up the charts and whether or not the CPI and inflation are going to cause some major moves with the Fed. We'll break all that down for you today. It's going to be a good one. You don't want to miss it. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back into Tech Path. Joining me today, of course, is Mr. Gareth Soloway, coming over from In the Money Stocks. Great to have you.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks.
Yeah. Hey, Gareth, let's get into a few things here. First off, I want to talk about just inflation. Obviously, we saw the CPI numbers come out. And you look at a few things coming in here. August CPI data, U.S. inflation rate rises to 3.7, above the expectations at 3.6. When you look at that right now, I mean, what does this do for you just from an overall market position? Are you more bearish, more bullish? Are you kind of neutral right now? Where do you stand?
Yeah, so it definitely sways me a little bit more on the bearish side. And the main reason for that is that it essentially tells us that rates are going to be higher for longer. Now, I don't really think that the Federal Reserve is going to raise rates a lot more because I think they realize what's happening to the real estate market, what's happening to various other sectors. But I do think that they're going to have trouble lowering rates substantially. And again, you have to look at tech stocks, especially the Magnificent Seven, and saying what were their valuations earlier this year based on the idea that rates were going to fall by the end of this year. We know that's not true now. And now even rate cuts are probably out into the second half of next year. So there has to be a repricing here of risk based on rates staying higher for longer.
With repricing, the risk reward basis, especially when you're looking at going in traditional securities, and then you take a look at global liquidity. Global liquidity down $1 trillion over the last 10 weeks. That's a lot more money moving off the sidelines here. How much of an impact does this really have on Wall Street and the S&P?
It does have a significant impact. And again, we see it even in crypto, right? Crypto is the highest risk curve kind of asset class. And we've seen that the struggle that especially the altcoins have had finding liquidity, finding buyers to go up. And so again, right now we've been coming out of this phase where there was a lot of money on the sidelines rushing in to chase stocks. But that was all on the condition that the Fed was going to be moving to the sidelines and then see a reduction in rates. And now I think people are going to have to redo it. A lot of these fund managers that got over long the market are going to probably have to pare back their positions. And I do think, again, we're starting to see lower highs on things like Apple, Microsoft, even Meta, which I know we'll talk about a little bit later. But to me, that's beginning of a trend change potentially in the stock market.
All right. Okay. So let's get into crypto a little bit. When I look at Bitcoin and the pressures on Bitcoin, you have to think about the big players, the people who hold the most Bitcoin out there. News on Binance right now, Binance CEO Brian Schroeder now leaving the company. We've seen a lot happening in the Binance ecosystem, not necessarily in a positive way, which many people would say, all right, this might be having some issues on Bitcoin because obviously they hold a lot. Here was Whale Wire talking about Binance's, their situation. 95% of your executives are moving out. This is a problem. Then you look at things within the Binance ecosystem. This is just looking at BUSD. This is the all-time where it's moved dramatically down. And then BNB, their price, recorrecting back down here to what was that? Let's go back in there, February 2021, so prior to the last bull run. Binance's role on Bitcoin and the impact that it could potentially have, would that be a black swan, do you feel like, on the Bitcoin, price position?
I do think if Binance as a whole disintegrated, right, if we saw a big collapse there, I think the U.S. area, it's tolerable because, again, it's a smaller portion of their business. But I do think that if we saw some major fraud in Binance, I mean, that would be an opportunity for the bigger crypto markets to take another slam down. And I think what the biggest issue is how many coins are these bigger exchanges holding? Like recently, just in the last week, we've heard about FTX finally getting approval to unload a lot of their coins. And again, we saw kind of the downtick just the other day in Bitcoin. And what if you have another exchange that holds X amount of Bitcoin? What does that do to Bitcoin's price? So these are the kind of issues. I mean, I think for the most part, Bitcoin is now free of regulatory oversight. We know that it's more of a commodity. So that's positive. But you still have these kind of potential for bad actors out there. And I don't think we've kind of discovered all of them yet.
Yeah, for sure. When you look at Bitcoin right now, you look at the nice little move here recently, just in the last 48 hours. What is your current position? Can you kind of chart that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the first time yesterday I saw something positive in the chart, and we know, the last time we discussed it, I thought this 31,000 area was just epic support going back to the bull market lows of 2021 and right through here and right through this area as well. And
Hmm.
basically, one of the things that concerned me since we were at those highs is you had the good news on Ripple. We had a 1 day pop on Bitcoin. The next day, we reversed that entire move. That's never good when you have good news and it reverses a day later. Over
Yeah.
here, we had the grayscale news, right? Popped. 2 days later, it reverses. The first positive thing here was that we had a down move here on, I believe this was Monday, and Tuesday we finally got a reversal in the opposite direction and are following it up today with another green day. So for me, this is a positive, short-term positive signal. The other positive thing too is that I was very concerned about Bitcoin potentially making a lower low for the first time here, right? Very clear, low, higher low, higher low, higher low. And if we pierced this low, I know it seems kind of crazy because it's so minuscule in terms of a lower bit, but if we had pierced it right here, that would have been a lower low. We did not do that, so that held. So at least if you're a bull, you have something to ride right now, saying, okay, price action all of a sudden reversed a down move for once, and we still have higher lows in the chart. Short term, technically, that is a positive for Bitcoin.
All right, so positive for Bitcoin short term. Long term, obviously, we've got a lot playing out within the macro markets, the Fed, et cetera,
That's
as
right.
well as what we're going to see in the job numbers and things of that nature starting to flow into to the reports, which I think will still have some pressure as well. You mentioned earlier the scenario that's playing out with FTX. This was, and I had showed a tweet. I just want to highlight this one. Solana was the big one that everybody was a little bit concerned about. Solana did take a downtrend and then it recovered slightly. If you look at your Solana chart and you think Solana on more of a long-term basis, let's say we go into Q1, we get past maybe a slight pressure on recession. Where does Solana stand for you?
Yeah, so Solana for me on the chart here, and this is a beautiful chart. We've been in this kind of channel, right? Perfectly parallel channel. Here's your highs, here's your low pivot here, and here's your low pivot here. Now, for me as a technician, if we just see a little bit more downside in Solana into this area, we have this flat trend line from this low right through here and the lower band of that channel. And that's right around 1650. So for me as a technician, I'm waiting to buy there. I still think Solana potentially has a bright future, assuming you allocate it properly in your portfolio with a small amount. But for me, it's a buy around $16.50. And again, that's just following the channel. And that's what technical trading is, right? We're not trying to overthink it. I'm just taking note that every time it hits this line, we get a bounce. And every time it hits this top line, it pulls back. And so I'm just looking to get that advantage in the chart. And that chart says buy around 1650 on Solana.
All right, so if you guys are following some of our sentiment data, we had been tracking Solana as it started to kind of dip a little bit back here on Friday last week, moving down into that position where we are right now that Gareth has mentioned. I kind of like that 1650 range you're talking about for Solana, especially with some of the pressures. Now, granted, there's a lot of things happening that are more fundamentally driven. Visa's partnership, Solana does their breakpoint thing at the end of October. So be on the watch out for those kinds of scenarios because you'll get those narratives that come out of those kind of events. Last year was a little different because they just had breakpoint, then FTX hit them in the face. And then, of course, we
Right.
saw Solana hit $8. So a lot happening there. All right, news coming in from the ETF land. Part of that is live. The ETF filings now: 15 ETH futures, 12 spot Bitcoin, 3 spot ETFs for Ethereum coming into the mix as well, with one just recently filed along with 21 shares. So you look at Ethereum and where it's currently holding. When you take a look at your chart, do you like Ethereum? And I'm going to give you kind of a comparison here: an Ethereum play versus a Solana play. How would you look at those two tokens?
That's a tough question. So, I mean, just looking at the Ethereum chart at least first, right? So, what we do see is that we broke that same line that Bitcoin broke, that upsloping trend line. The difference between Ethereum and Bitcoin is that we had a higher low here, right? Low, higher low, higher low, higher low. We actually made a lower low. So, if you compare the two, Bitcoin and Ethereum, Ethereum is technically weaker, which makes sense, further out on the risk curve, and also it's kind of a pseudo altcoin. It's not quite an altcoin like we think about some of the other ones, but it's still again, is not a Bitcoin. Now, we did make a lower low, but right now you're holding on to this pivot low. So I think as long as you hold on to this 1545 level, we could continue to move up. Resistance would be around 1865, right up in this trend line zone here. Now, again, my only concern with Ethereum is, do you have a head and shoulders here? All right. So again, another technical pattern, but a very clear head and shoulders that has broken. And the way you do head and shoulders patterns is to find the target price, right? You basically do a drop from the highest point to the neckline here, and you take that same $650 move and you say, okay, where did it break? And you drop that down, and essentially you get a move down into this $1,100 range. So again, I don't know if this will play out, but it is a chart pattern that has my attention that could signal a little bit of a move lower. I mean, it doesn't have to be right now. It could be in a week, 2 weeks, a month, or 2 months from now, but it would be something that I would just kind of pay attention to. And honestly, like I said, I'm short-term, very short-term positive on Bitcoin, but I do think the midterm is still murky, mainly because we're starting to see this macro data shaping up that's very concerning. Inflation's inching up a little bit. It's going to make it harder for the Fed to come print money when the economy stutters. And if the stock market, right, if we take the NASDAQ, let's just say we enter a recession or stagflation, the stock market, let's say, drops 20, 25%. Where is Ethereum? Where is Bitcoin if that happens? And I would just dare say that probably lower based on risk, reduction.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the S&P, I mean, it's literally been since March up and to the right here. So nice moves. Obviously, it's corrected slightly, back since July. But okay, so with that being the case, still a potential light recession ahead of us. We're starting, we've talked about this all year, a lot of these trailing indicators coming in. How hard would the markets take it if we continue to see inflation inching up? In other words, we've got a reversal on what we had been seeing, which was a downward trend. Finally, all these other indicators coming in. Do you think the market itself really starts to price that in, or is this yet to come?
No, I think it hasn't priced it in yet. I still think the market, at least the stock market, is in this mode of saying, hey, listen, things will be okay. The general consensus is still a soft landing or no landing at all. So I don't think that has been priced into the stock market. Now, crypto markets are a little different, right? I mean, you have Bitcoin and some of these other coins, which I think initially when the stock market's selling, they go down because people just get fearful and they sell. But I actually think down the line, 6, 12 months out, Bitcoin could find a bottom and start going inverse to the stock market as a safety hedge play. And we've seen little bits of that, right? When the banks started to collapse, Bitcoin had a great run. It's not quite at that level just yet. But I do think that at this point, it probably still reacts with the risk on kind of or risk off type scenario, but down the line, it should switch.
I want to talk to you about Coinbase because this is something that, when you look at Coinbase's legal situation, then you look at just the alignment that they've been doing with Base in general. When people start to realize what that really means to the blockchain market, I think they'll start to see, hey, there's some really cool stuff here. Then you have Cathie Wood talking about Bitcoin, world's digital monetary system, Lightning, Bitcoin's payments layer. Coinbase integration with Lightning will give its 100 million users an on-ramp to faster and cheaper Bitcoin transactions. So they're making some moves, meaning Brian Armstrong, Coinbase. If we do get a favorable position in the legal situation, the legal case, which we've had Meta Lawman talking about this, he thinks it's probably going to be very positive for them in the coming months. What would that do to Bitcoin because of what's happening with Coinbase as a stock? And I would love to see your position on Coinbase, the stock.
Yeah, just taking a look at Coinbase, the stock here. So we had that monstrous run, right? And again, on a technical basis, it went right to the highs of August 2022, and then we stalled and have pulled back. Now, there's a tendency in stocks when they break out above key kind of ranges like this downsloping trend line, eventually you come back to retest that line. And so right now that's around $61, $62. But once you retest it, it usually gathers steam again and makes another significant run up. So again, I would say shorter term, and again, this this may go along with whether or not Bitcoin kind of struggles a little bit after this maybe short-term bounce. But over the next 6 months, I would think that Coinbase would likely, the stock would head higher. And that's kind of, not only is that technically based, but like you said, it's based partially also on the fundamentals of winning
Right.
lawsuits and a better kind of shaping of the regulatory atmosphere. And again, whether Gary Gensler wants it or not, eventually we will get regulatory clarity. Again, it just may be 3 months, 6 months, a year, who knows, but it is going to come.
Yeah. I want to hit on two stocks now, both Unity, and we'll talk about some of the things that happened yesterday with Unity, and then we'll wrap up with Meta. But looking at Unity, I just want to go to a tweet right quick. In case some of you guys don't realize what's going on with Unity, Unity, one of the leaders out there in terms of software development for Web3 gaming. This tweet right here, Unity is applying a fee per install starting 2024. Unity understands its monopolistic position within game development, so they're maybe abusing it here. I think it's capitalistic. This is what happens in capital markets. But they are also coming in and removing the annual revenue limit of 100,000 USD for eligibility to use the Unity personal plan. So there are some things here, and we've kind of been talking about it internally. Unity took a little bit of a hit, but once the numbers come out, when they're quarterly, I mean, they're going to look good, and they're going to come out. And Wall Street loves money. They love money.
Yes,
so
they do.
what happens to Unity as a stock?
So just looking at the stock here, the first thing that draws my attention is that this was a $200 stock back in 2021. So anytime a stock has made that high or a high like that and then has come down so significantly where it's trading at 36 and change, $37, it does get my attention because eventually you assume it can retest those highs. And so that's the first thing. Then if we zoom in here, we see this first trend line connecting this low from May through both lows on May, and it goes right to this low here. So this is your first area of support, right around $35.30 or so. For me, the longer picture is this wedge pattern, and we can see it here. Even if I take this away, this one here, this is a bigger wedge. You get a break above $48, and this is off to the races. But I love, like, these are my types of charts where, people have sold it heavily. People are no longer super bullish on it. Kind of it's that niche product, which eventually, based on what we think is coming fundamentally for the crypto sector, will be a positive for this as well. And so again, could it drop down a little bit? Yeah, it could go down to $30. That's your low end here, $27. But overall, the upside potential for me is very, very significant, where again, just this high alone is up to $58, $59. And then you talk about some of these pivots along the way. And so again, depending on your time horizon, if your time horizon is a shorter time horizon, yeah, it could go down a little bit. Maybe you don't buy it here. But ultimately, if your time horizon is 6-12 months out, I do think it's worth looking at. Absolutely.
So this is going to be interesting because of the fact that it has some fairly, implicating situations on the Web3 market, and gaming in general is already suffering a little bit, obviously, with, just the deflection of what's happening over on, Binance's ecosystem, which most likely will start to see some movement into some other chains. Unity could still come out of this, but they also could see a lot of challenges here. So I don't know. I feel like it's a little bit bad timing unless they are foreseeing a big bull run on, Web3 gaming and other game development, in the coming months.
Yeah,
we'll see how that plays out.
And I think I was just going to say, and I think that's the thing, right? Is going back to the chart, is it could easily come down and retest this low area, right? I mean, but in the scheme of the moves that it's made, it's a very minor move just down to this lower level when you look at the bigger picture. And so again, as an investor, could it go down there? Sure. And percentage wise from here, that's a decent drop. But again, the question is, what are you looking at as the bigger time frame? Does it have a successful kind of product brand dealing with this newer technology? And I think that's where the bigger story comes out. It just could take a little bit longer period of time.
Yeah. All right, Gareth, Meta, the Connect event is happening here coming up in the 27th and 8th. It's going to be a virtual event. So the likelihood is this gentleman right here, Mr. Zuckerberg, is probably going to launch something big to try to counter Apple's moves, and most likely also position and solidify Meta as one of the virtual gaming leaders. If they come out with something in terms of a device that really makes a potential hit right before the holidays, what do you like in terms of the Meta stock and how it will perform?
Yeah, this is a trickier one because, looking at the stock, I always look at how far it's already come. And we know that it was $86 stock in late 2022, and it's run all the way to 300 and change. And one of the things that a lot of these Magnificent Seven have, and you could look at Apple or Microsoft or any of these other ones, even NVIDIA. I mean, NVIDIA started to struggle a little bit. They have this high and they have a low, and then they're making a potential lower high. So for me, this is the type, versus the Unity software where it's still close to the lows in the bigger scheme of things. This one has had such a rally that, of course, if they come out with the perfect product, but again, remember, I mean, they had the Oculus, right? It was the Oculus. I mean, that didn't really sell. So I think for me to really be into this, I would have to see numbers coming out to believe that they're good enough and they're selling a good enough thing. For me, the chart itself is not a chart that I would get involved in. The one thing that I kind of catch as well is that there was a trend line here, right? So we have this very strict upsloping trend line where we kept on bouncing off of. That has now been broken as well. And there's a pattern here. This is kind of more of a bearish flag pattern. And again, to me, it would just be a warning sign. But just to be clear, this isn't any different than what Apple's showing, right? If we go to Apple is same thing, high, and it's made a potential low, then a lower high, and it's starting to come down here. And Microsoft, much the same. In fact, the Microsoft chart almost looks identical to Meta. So I guess my point is that it's not so much about what Meta's doing and what they're branding and what they're bringing to market. It's just that a lot of these Magnificent Seven, and I'm including Meta in that, just ran far too fast to the upside and are now having to readjust to kind of the higher rates for longer narrative.
Yeah, for sure. Gareth, it's always love to kind of pick your brain and kind of get your framework of where things are moving in the markets, because you have a good balance, I think, of both crypto and traditional markets out there. If you guys want to check out Gareth, go over to intomoneystocks.com. He does a ton of cool stuff over there that will help you maybe, level up your investing game. So check it out. Gareth, great having you on the show today. Thanks so much for stopping in.
Thanks so much, Paul. Have a great one.
You bet. All right, so you guys are tuned in, maybe over on the podcast side of things. Make sure and get over here to the YouTube channel. You'll catch all these great tips and tricks that Gareth does on his charts, because you have to watch him do his magic. And I think you guys are going to love it. So come over here to YouTube, hit that subscribe button, and make sure and hit the little bell there. It's going to give you notifications when we do live. We're going to try to pick up our live streams a little bit more. I know we've been a little bit lacking on that, trying to get you guys as many videos as possible to keep up with just the news flow. That's been the challenge. And then last but not least is make sure to get in on the Diamond Circle. The Diamond Circle is our #1 way that we share additional content, research, and ways that you can get more podcasts, things of that nature. If you're really trying to level up your crypto game, that's the one you want to join. And of course, if you want to catch me, it's out there on Twitter @Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.